It has now been revealed that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are obstructing the work of the inquiry by refusing to turn over documents to the Commissioner.
Yes.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Some serious news broke today regarding the public inquiry. Justice Marie-Josée Hogue and the Public Inquiry Commission had been promised unfettered access to any documents that she deemed relevant for the purposes of the public inquiry. It turns out what Trudeau actually meant was any documents that he was comfortable turning over. The Globe and Mail reported that the Liberal government is deliberately obstructing access to documents that are protected by cabinet confidence.
Let's take a look. So we're going to take a look at the news of the day to make sure that, the important stories are being reported. But as you can see on CBC, everything but this latest Trudeau scandal is being reported. So we got Ticketmaster, we got hackers releasing corporate data stolen of London drugs, spinal surgeries needed on people, seafood chain Red Lobster. So, we have all of that, but there's absolutely zero mention of the public inquiry.
But, they did put out a nice little article about the whole Fergus debacle where, again, they framed it that the Conservatives are the big bad bullies and Fergus is just, misunderstood.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's the Conservatives' fault that Fergus is partisan. Anyway, let's get to the actual, article that did their work in exposing this. So, Trudeau cabinet withholding documents on foreign interference from inquiry. The Liberal government is facing pushback from Justice Marie-Josée Hogue for citing cabinet confidentiality in redacting records provided to the public inquiry investigating meddling by China and other hostile states in Canadian democracy. The government is also completely withholding an undisclosed number of cabinet documents, according to the Privy Council office, which reports directly to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc had initially promised the Commission into Foreign Interference would have full access to secret documents, including, quote, all relevant cabinet documents, end quote, even if some of that sensitive information can't be made available to Canadians. As we've been seeing in the public inquiry, they've had many of these hearings in camera, meaning behind the public eye, so they can actually discuss in evidence and information that can't be made public. But a dispute has arisen after the government invoked cabinet confidence to redact some cabinet records and to deny the Hogue inquiry access to an unknown number of documents involving foreign interference.
Buried in a footnote in Justice Hogue's May 3rd report, she said there were redactions in some of the cabinet documents handed over to the inquiry and added, quote, discussions as to the applications of these privileges is ongoing, end quote.
So let's just take a look at that, okay? So, you know us. So here's the actual report, and a link to this can be found in the description. And once you click into there, you get access to the full report. So what are they referring to? Well, one of the passages that talks about this is a narration by Justice Hogue, and she says, I have considered all the evidence before me. I have had access to the relevant documents without any redactions for reasons of national security. Footnote. So you may wonder, what is that footnote referring to? This is what the footnote says. Some documents contain redactions for cabinet confidence, solicitor-client privilege, or protection of personal information. Discussions as to the application of these privileges is ongoing. Now there's a second section where she talks about this as well. Pursuant to its terms of reference and its rule of practice and procedure, these were rules and practices that were laid out at the beginning of the Commission as to how it would operate in terms of handling sensitive information and documents. The Commission was given access to the unredacted versions of all relevant documents. Footnote. What does that footnote say? Save for a small number of documents that have been redacted to protect cabinet confidences, solicitor-client privilege, and personal information. So that's what the article is talking about when they're saying there was these little footnotes in there that talked about the fact that, she wasn't getting all the information. Now, the second footnote is referring to some specific documents in a specific section of the inquiry, but the Globe and Mail's focused on the first one. And for good reason as well, because Hogue doesn't know how many documents have actually been kept from the public inquiry. And there's these cabinet confidence documents that she was promised to be unredacted, but it was delivered to them with many redactions in them. So that's what they are actually raising as of yesterday to take to the government to say, hey, you're not providing all the information that was agreed upon here. Anyhow, let's get back to the article.
Michael Tansey, a senior communication advisor to the Commission, said Wednesday that Justice Hogue had no further comment. Quote, in light of the ongoing discussions with the government on document production, the Commission has nothing to add at this time, end quote, he said. The PCO told the Globe and Mail that nearly 10% of cabinet documents provided to the inquiry have been redacted. An undisclosed number of other secret cabinet documents have been completely withheld.
Pierre-Alain Bujold, manager of media relations at the PCO, did not say how many cabinet documents have been held back, but he said the Commission has been given access to, quote, relevant information, end quote, about what the Cabinet knew concerning foreign interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections. Quote, as of May 17, 2024, approximately 9% of the 33,000 documents provided by the government contain one or more redactions. Other documents covered entirely by these exemptions have not been provided to the Commission, end quote, Mr. Bujold said in an email to the Globe, which requested information on what documents have been withheld. Quote, discussions about document collection, production, and appropriate disclosure have been and remain ongoing, end quote, he said. Dan Stanton, a former manager at the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, and now director of the National Security Program at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute, said Justice Hogue has the security clearance to see every item of classified intelligence, including cabinet records.
Quote, if things are withheld from the Commissioner, then that calls into question the effectiveness of the inquiry, end quote, he said. Quote, the Commissioner should be seeing everything, regardless of what is disclosed to the public. Otherwise, how can it be assessed? End quote.
And this is what the Conservatives wanted to know in question period today. Here's Michael Cooper asking the question as to what is going on with this inquiry and why is the obstruction happening.
Honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, after the Prime Minister got caught turning a blind eye to Beijing's interference in our elections, his government was dragged kicking and screaming into calling a public inquiry. It has now been revealed that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are obstructing the work of the inquiry by refusing to turn over documents to the Commissioner. A simple question, will the Prime Minister end the obstruction and turn over all documents requested by Madam Justice Hogue unredacted, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend knows very well that there's no obstruction at all. He should have a word with his House Leader, with whom I worked very collaboratively all summer in setting up the Hogue Commission. We agreed to all the details of the terms of reference, including the fact that solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence were essential things that needed to be protected. And, of course, the people that served in Mr. Harper's government would know the attachment Mr. Harper had to those principles. But our government went a step further and made available cabinet documents that were relevant to this inquiry, and will continue to do everything necessary to allow them to do their work.
So it's always interesting that the people who get to decide what's relevant are the people that are actually kind of the ones under investigation right now. So that's the concerning thing. Let's go back to the article.
Mr. Bujold said the inquiry had broad access to classified and unclassified documents, but information subject to solicitor-client privilege or information that is a cabinet confidence have been withheld. Asked to explain the reasoning behind the move, Mr. Bujold said, quote, cabinet confidentiality is a cornerstone of the Westminster system of government that is protected by convention, common law, and legislative provisions. It is critical to allowing Cabinet to carry out its mandate effectively, end quote.
Section 39 of the Canada Evidence Act safeguards cabinet confidentiality. a long-standing principle upheld by the courts to protect collective decision-making by ministers. The confidentiality exceptions are cabinet documents that the government authorized for disclosure to the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency. This followed a recommendation from former Governor General David Johnston before he resigned as Independent Special Rapporteur on Foreign Interference. Mr. Johnston, who recommended against a public inquiry, wrote in a report last year that in CIRA and NSICOP, the previously mentioned committees in the previous paragraph, should have access to every cabinet document he reviewed. The two organizations are also reviewing what the Liberal government and national security agencies knew about allegations of foreign interference in the past two Canadian elections and when they knew it.
Quote, if Justice Hogue is going to fulfill her mandate, she needs access to all the cabinet documents to find out who in the Trudeau government knew about the PRC, People's Republic of China, interference, and what did they do about it? End quote, said Michael Chong, a conservative foreign affairs critic. Mr. Chong has been targeted by Beijing, including members of his family in Hong Kong. NDP MP Jenny Kwan, who CSIS also said was targeted by China, said it is imperative for the Prime Minister to release all cabinet documents to this impartial inquiry. Quote, it is vital that the Commissioner have access to all relevant cabinet confidences to answer key questions central to her mandate. Who in the government knew about foreign interference? When did they know it? And what did they do with that information? End quote, she said.
Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch, said Canada's spy agencies have disclosed all foreign interference-related documents they have without redactions to the Hogue inquiry, and there is no reason why the Trudeau cabinet does not follow the same example. He said that the government disclosed cabinet confidence documents to last year's inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act. Mr. Conacher said Justice Hogue should be publicly demanding disclosure of all the cabinet documents because, quote, the secrecy makes it impossible for the inquiry commissioner to determine who knew what, when they knew it, and what they did, end quote. Quote, if the Trudeau cabinet continues to hide records from the inquiry, Canadians are justified in assuming that disclosure of the records would make the cabinet look bad, and that is why records are being kept secret, end quote, he added.
When he announced the inquiry in September, Mr. LeBlanc said, quote, Justice Hogue will have full access to all relevant cabinet documents, as well as all other information she deems relevant for the purposes of her inquiry, end quote. Meanwhile, the Commission announced Wednesday that it had launched public consultations for submissions on how to deal with foreign interference in Canada's federal electoral processes and democratic institutions. Justice Hogue resumes public hearings in the fall and will submit a second and final report on recommendations to combat foreign interference at the end of December.
So, we have an interesting scenario here because there were questions about Marie-Josée Hogue as the choice of the commissioner here, and there was good arguments to be made from both sides as to why she may be good for this and why she may be a concern. So the fact that we're here and she's asking for documents and the Trudeau government isn't giving them to her, that kind of says to me that she's doing her job pretty well, and she's not just giving up and saying, all right, well, they're not giving us the documents, so we're just going to ignore that and move on. So I think it's actually a really good thing at this point that she's facing pushback and she's not having it. She wants those documents to really understand what's going on, because we saw enough in the public inquiry to see that there was something going on. And people knew more than they said they did. Never mind the Han Dong debacle. That was the worst testimony I've ever seen for anything. Right. And if you haven't seen that, go back and check out that video. That was ridiculous. Ridiculous. A guy that's suing Global News over quote-unquote false allegations, yet all of the allegations and situations were put to him, all of the evidence was put to him, and he didn't refute any of it. So that's really going to hurt his lawsuit against Global News. But I digress. So this is actually, as frustrating as this is, that It's the same old story with the Trudeau government. It's really encouraging that the commission isn't backing down from this and saying, no, we want the documents and we want them now. And they're being publicly called out for this. And you have people that are talking to the newspapers. You have the Globe and Mail sticking with this story and saying, no, we're going to give people the truth on what is actually going on. And what is going on is, it seems like the Trudeau government is doing what we suspected, and they definitely have something to hide, which is why they were trying to avoid the public inquiry in the first place.
Well, as Mr. Conacher said right in the article, if the Trudeau cabinet continues to hide records from the inquiry, Canadians are justified in assuming that disclosure of the records would make the cabinet look bad. And I just want to point out that although these documents are behind cabinet confidence, they don't need to be presented to the public to be part of the public inquiry. They can be presented to Justice Hogue, and she can determine whether or not they need to be released to the public. But she's the person who needs to see them. And the Liberal government is once again using cabinet confidence to hide documentation of what we suspect may be wrongdoing.
Right. Or negligence, or incompetence, or hell. All of the above.